Welcome everyone, bienvenidos a todos. Empezaré en inglés y luego repetiré lo que voy a decir en español. I'm Lily Berciaga, president and founder of ALMAS. We are the first Latino-led, Latino-serving nonprofit in Naperville, or in the Naperville area, and we aim to celebrate, connect, and empower our community. Thank you to our partners. We have Padres, Lideres, Activos, Aurora, Chinese American Women in Action, Lara Leon Law, Illinois Workers in Action, Indivisible Naperville, and the Office of Senator Laura Ellman. Thank you for your support in ensuring that we are sharing this event to our immigrant communities so they can be informed and prepared during these challenging times. We would like to offer appreciation for three of our partners in particular. We can go to the next slide, please. Special thank you to Indivisible Naperville, to Senator Laura Ellman, and then also to Encore's Home Solutions. Indivisible Naperville has provided funding today for our interpretation services. We will be providing services in Spanish. We also have support from Senator Laura Ellman's office, who provided funding to provide hard copies of the deportation guide that we'll be talking about today. And then we also have Encore's Home Solution, who has provided generous support to provide programming to the Latino community. So thank you all. Because linguistic justice is very important to us, all ALMAS events offer Spanish interpretation to ensure that everything is accessible. We want to give you some instructions. If you want to listen in Spanish, if that's your preference, you can follow the instructions on the next slide. So we can go to the next slide. While you do that, I will give a translation. I will give some translation and offer the Spanish instructions. Thank you. Yo soy Lili Burciaga, presidenta y cofundadora de ALMAS, la Alianza de Latinos Motivando Acción en los Suburbios. Somos la primera organización sin fines de lucro dirigida y que sirve a la comunidad latina en el área de Naperville. Y nuestro objetivo es celebrar, conectar y empoderar a nuestra comunidad. Gracias a nuestros socios por ayudarnos a compartir este evento para asegurar de que nuestras comunidades inmigrantes puedan estar informadas y preparadas durante estos tiempos desafiantes. Gracias especialmente a Indivisible Naperville, Home Solutions, Encore's Home Solutions y a la oficina de la senadora Ellman. Hoy han prohibido han financiado a las copias de los guías que discutiremos hoy. También Indivisible Naperville nos ha podido proveer la interpretación y Anchor's Home Solution fue muy generoso con el apoyo para ofrecer programas a la comunidad latina. Porque la justicia lingüística es muy importante para nosotros. En los eventos de ALMAS ofrecemos interpretación en español para garantizar que todo sea accesible. Si deseas escuchar el seminario web en español, puedes hacerlo de la siguiente manera. Verás en la barra de herramientas de Zoom, puedes hacer clic en el icono de globo etiquetado como interpretación. Ahí vas a seleccionar el español de la lista. Después puedes ajustar tu volumen si es que es necesario. Y también puedes escoger cuál presentación vas a ver, si será la de inglés o la de español. Si necesitas alguna ayuda, puedes preguntarnos en el chat, dejarnos saber qué es lo que ocupas. Tenemos a Diana aquí con nosotros, que estará monitoreando el chat el día de hoy. Next slide. Perdón. Sorry, I'm having some technical difficulties over here. Bueno, we'll be starting with just a quick overview of what we'll be talking about today. We have 3 speakers lined up. Our first speaker is Laura Leon from Laura Leon Law. She will be talking about knowing your rights as an immigrant. She'll be followed by Giselle Rodriguez from Illinois Workers in Action. Excuse me. And she'll be talking a little bit about workers' rights and allyship. And then we'll be followed by Lee Ragsdale from Education Justice Project. And she'll be talking about a new path, a deportation guide. We will be pausing between speakers to take questions. So if you do have questions, use the chat so that you could ask those questions. Diana will be monitoring for us, and she will let us know what questions have been requested. We will be sharing some resources, so make sure you also take a close look at the chat because those will be shared via the chat. Next slide. So our three speakers, really briefly, I can share that Laura Leon is a lawyer, immigration lawyer from Laura Leon Law. We have Giselle Rodriguez, the Executive Director of Illinois Workers in Action. And then we have Lee Ragsdale, the Director of the RRP Program and Education Justice Project. I will start with Laura. Laura actually opened up her law office in Naperville very recently, Laura Leon Law. She's dedicated exclusively to practicing U.S. immigration law. Being an immigrant herself, she brings personal experience to her work. Thank you, Laura, whenever you're ready.
Thank you, Lily. Next slide. I am Laura Leon. I'm the founder of my law firm, Laura Leon Law PLLC. I'm originally from Colombia, and I came to this country at a very young age. When I came to this country, I went through the legalization process myself, and we hired an immigration lawyer to help us through the whole process. And so ever since I was a young child, I was inspired to become an immigration lawyer. And years later, I am now an immigration lawyer. I've been able to help countless families get legal protection in the United States, legal status. And we've helped over thousands of families in the United States nationwide, not just in Illinois or Texas. We've been able to help families all over the United States. I have over 10 years of experience in immigration law, and I'm really excited to share this presentation with all of you for you to share with your communities, for you to inform those who might be at risk of potentially a deportation. We have two offices, one in Texas and one in Illinois. There is my information, website, and also social media that you might, if you want to follow me, you're welcome to follow me on social media. Next slide. So let's talk about the what's happening right now in politics with immigration, the climate. Ever since January 20th, we've seen a lot of changes in immigration law from Trump's first day of presidency. One of the things that as immigration lawyers we were able to identify is who is at risk for deportation. Basically, there are three priority groups of people who may be deported and who are a priority under this administration. First, people who have already had deportation orders. This means that people that have had the case denied were referred to an immigration court. The immigration court found that their case does not merit an approval, therefore it was also denied, and then order them a deportation. A lot of these people did leave, but a lot of them came back. So these are people who have had these deportation orders and can be reactivated. So this administration can reactivate these deportation orders and deport these people again. Or people who, for example, came to this country, saw an immigration judge, they got also a deportation order, but they never left the country. So these are also people who will be or are a priority to this administration for deportation. We also have people who have committed certain crimes, specifically violent crimes, are people who are also a priority for this administration for deportation. How is ICE getting information about these people? Usually are people who are already in a probation procedure where they're going to check in with the courts, they're going to check in with their probation officer, and a lot of times during this time is when ICE is able to detain these people and start a removal proceeding against them. as well as people who have been here for less than 2 years. Under the Biden administration, we saw a lot of people who were allowed to come into the United States to seek asylum, to get paroles. And so basically, under the Trump administration, they want to remove all of these people who have recently arrived in the United States, who probably don't have a valid case in the United States. Obviously, this is all their intentions. People who have come into the United States in the last 2 years do merit an opportunity to have their due process, have their cases heard in court, and see whether or not they qualify for the relief they're seeking. So basically, these are the three priorities under the Trump administration. Recently, Congress passed the law, the Lake and Riley Act. This law was passed as a result of a murder committed by an unlawful immigrant who killed someone by the name of Lake and Riley. So this really was a national news and created a lot of tension amongst politicians. And they passed this law. Congress passed this law that basically says that anyone who is accused, not necessarily charged or convicted, anyone that's just generally accused of assault, of theft, robbery, aggression towards a peace officer, a law enforcement, or anyone that has caused bodily injury or death to someone, and just because they were accused. So that doesn't mean that they're actually convicted or they're actually guilty of doing this, but just a general accusation can place immigrants in deportation proceedings. And usually, people who are under deportation proceedings as a result of the Lake and Riley Act are mandatory detained, meaning that they don't qualify for bonds under immigration law. So this is a very scary law, as our constitution allows people to go through a criminal process to show whether or not they are innocent or guilty of a crime. And basically, this is basically surpassing a lot of the due process in our country, and allowing administrative agencies like ICE to capture people, to detain people based on a general accusation. So this really puts in danger a lot of our immigrant community who are innocent in most cases, and they're being placed in detention and likely will not be released in the United States and will likely be deported. So this is a very scary law for a lot of our immigrant community. So it's important that people who have this type of criminal offenses, or who've been accused of these types of criminal offenses, to seek the advice of an immigration lawyer to see if there's any way to protect themselves, start a process. In case there's a detention, there's layers of protection that allow a lawyer to argue on their behalf and allow them to stay in the United States. So it's a very scary law. Also, you might have heard about the removing citizenship by birth in the United States. Was an executive order signed by the president. Already 22 states have filed a countersuit preventing the United States from implementing this law. This law was supposed to go in effect this month, but it's not going to effect because it's currently in court. And obviously, it's a law or this executive order that goes against our constitution. And so this is probably going to go up to the Supreme Court. I don't really think, from my opinion, I don't think this is going to be an actual issue for immigrants, as a lot of states have already expressed a desire for this executive order to be completely dismissed. Next slide. Okay, so let's talk about what happens if a law officer detains you, right? What happens if a law officer detains you? What should you do? Specifically, here in the state of Illinois, anyone who's over the age of 16 is eligible to obtain a driver's license, regardless of their immigration status. So that's something that we have to keep in mind when an officer stops us. When they ask us for ID, the only thing we should be showing is our driver's license, right? Because that's a state ID, and that's the ID that we need to be able to drive legally in the state of Illinois. Which means that I would advise that our immigrant community does not pull out their passport, their country's ID. Just provide the information that they're seeking, your driver's license. You give them their driver's license. So if you don't have a driver's license right now, and you're an unlawful immigrant, I would highly recommend that you get a driver's license as soon as possible to give you that extra layer of protection. In case a police officer does inquire about your immigration status, you have the right to remain silent. If an officer says, "What is your legal status?" you can say, "I will exercise my right to remain silent. I will not be answering more questions about this specific subject. I will want to speak to a lawyer." So just know that you have that right. Also, you should only feel required to answer questions in regards to the traffic stop. For example, your ID, we've already addressed, get a driver's license. Your insurance, your registration, basic information about you. That should be the main conversation you should have with a law enforcement agent. It's very important that we, as immigrant community, we are very cautious, right? So we are our insurance is up to date. The card registration is up to date. We don't really want to give them reasons to stop us or give them reasons to call eyes on us. So we want to make sure that we are complying with the law when we're driving. Also, as a word of advice, word of caution, people who have had DWIs in the past, who have an alcohol problem or whatnot, take an Uber, have someone pick you up. Like, it's at this time, we cannot put ourselves in a situation where we can be separated from our families and likely be deported. So just be very conscious about your actions when you're driving. Also, after the officer has given you your ticket or a citation or a warning, you have the right to ask, "Am I free to go?" You have the right to say, "Am I free to go?" Because obviously there's nothing else that would need you to stay there, right? So you have the right to ask the officer, "Am I free to leave?" If the officer says yes, then you can go on your way. Usually, officers cannot reasonably keep you there if they don't have a probable cause that there's an ongoing crime or there's additional investigation that needs to occur. So remember to stay calm, to only answer the questions regarding the traffic violation. You have the right to remain silent, and you also have the right to say, "Am I free to go?" If the officer says you're not free to go, they have their obligation, their responsibility to read your Miranda rights. And if this happens, you are to remain silent for the rest of this arrest. Next slide. What happens if you actually have an encounter directly with ICE? Let's say there was a raid at your job. Let's say you were stopped in public. What should you do, right? What should you do? What are your rights? It's important that you understand what to do in this type of situations. First of all, please stay calm, right? Stay calm, and always speak the truth. Don't lie about your identity. Don't lie about your status. Just stay calm and speak the truth. A lot of times, you will probably hear some people say, you have the right to remain silent. Don't say anything. Yes, you always have the right to remain silent. But when it becomes an opportunity for you to talk about your case with an officer, like say, "I have a pending case with USCIS. I have family here, I have kids, I'm married to a US citizen, I am married to a resident," then this gives you an opportunity to be your own advocate with an ICE officer. When the ICE officer is asking you questions that make you uncomfortable or you don't know how to answer, then yeah, you have the right to remain silent. But if the officer is asking you about your family, like you have kids, and let's say you already are carrying their birth certificates, then you can show that to them. Because the idea when you're having a conversation with an ICE officer is for them to determine whether or not to detain you indefinitely or to release you, and then you go back to your house. So it's very important that we stay calm, we provide the general information. But if there's questions that you don't feel comfortable answering, then don't. You have the right to remain silent. Here are some things that you can take with you. You should be carrying copies of, not originals. Never carry originals with you. Always copies. For example, if your case has already been approved or a part of your case has been approved, carry the approval notice, a copy of that. If you have already a work authorization card, you can also carry that with you and show that to the officer. If your case is pending, not approved, you can carry the receipt notices from USCIS stating that you have a pending case. If, for example, you are here on a student visa, then obviously have copies of your visa. If you're here on a tourist visa and you are still within that time frame that you can be legally in the United States, then show them your visa. If you have TPS, TPS is a protective status in the United States. It's a temporary protective status for certain people from certain countries. If you have this protection, show them proof of that. Also, for our DACA recipients, it's important that you have a copy of your approval notice as well. All of these are layers of protection. This is your opportunity to advocate for yourself, so that the officer can say, well, you know what? I'm going to take these people who don't have anything, who probably have removal orders, and then let these people go back to their house. That actually can happen. ICE officers have that kind of discretion. Also, like I mentioned before, you may be able to provide information about your family, carry copies of your kids' birth certificates, shows copies, never originals. Also, if you're married to a U.S. citizen or a lawful permanent resident, you can also carry that marriage certificate. So it just gives you that opportunity, initial conversation with an ICE officer to advocate for yourself. Also, very important, you have the right to talk to an immigration judge. You have the right to speak to an immigration judge. So please let the officer know, I want to see an immigration judge. Usually what this happens is that they take you to a detention facility, they'll process your information, they'll send this to the immigration court, and the immigration court will schedule you for a hearing while you're still detained. So the reality is people who are detained and are waiting a court hearing, they'll likely be detained for at least a month to 2 months before a judge can make a decision whether or not to release a person on bond. So just keep that in mind. Keep that in mind that, again, if you can be your initial advocate, prevent a detention, even better. But if you do get detained, please ask to see an immigration judge and do not sign anything. Do not sign anything. ICE goal is to deport you. They're not your friends. So please do not sign anything. Talk to an immigration judge, and also call a family member, someone that you trust. I wouldn't call your immigration attorney right away because sometimes these detentions can happen at late hours, and a lot of lawyers do not work after 5 p.m. So call your trusted family member, and then your trusted family member can speak to your lawyer. Also, when you are detained, they'll give you a number. It starts usually with the letter A. I know the letter A is not a number, but it literally starts with the letter A and then 9 digits. So whenever you're speaking with your trusted family member, give them that information, because as an immigration lawyer, I can look up your case, I can look up where you're being detained, and I can get all the information I need to be able to help you. Let me see. Okay, so basically at the end, it's ICE has the discretion to that whether let you remain free with your family or detain you and start a removal proceeding. Next slide. All right. What happens if ICE comes to your house, right? Where we don't know, do we open the door? Do we not open the door? And just right off the bat, a lot of these ICE officers will be wearing civilian clothes. So you might feel like, oh, it's someone that has a question. Do not open the door. Just do not open the door. Through a window, you can ask them, what do you need? If they identify themselves as ICE officers, then just remember the following things that you should do. It's very important that if an ICE officer comes to your house, they need to have an arrest warrant in order to be able to detain yourself or a family member in the house. If they don't have a valid arrest warrant, they cannot detain you. Okay, they cannot detain you, and they cannot come to your house. Like, they cannot come inside your house. Important things to look at are arrest warrant is the make sure that the name of the individual is actually stated on the arrest warrant. Make sure that the arrest warrant is signed by a judge, a magistrate judge. It needs to be signed. If it's not signed, it's not valid. And also make sure that it's recent. Sometimes they will pull out arrest warrants from years ago, right? And they'll bring it back to you and say, hey, we're arresting you. But if it's not recent arrest warrant signed by a judge, then do not open the door. How do you verify this information? You can ask the ICE officers to put the document on the window, And as long as you have clear visibility to see what it says, then you can read the information. You can have them slide the arrest warrant under the door and you can actually read it. If you don't understand it, you have the right to ask them to get you an interpreter, or you can call your kids or someone that you trust so that they can read this document for you, but do not open the door. Also, if the arrest warrant is valid, it has the name of the immigrant, it has a signature by a magistrate judge, it has a recent date, then the person they're looking for needs to come out of the property. I wouldn't open the front door. I would try to come out from the back door and prevent ICE from coming into the home. ICE can ask you, hey, can I come into the home? Just say no. You have the right to say no. You have the right to protect the people in your home. And if you open the front door, ICE, sometimes it can be aggressive and they can come into your home and then detain anyone else who doesn't have status. So you want to protect your family. You want to protect the members of your home from being detained by ICE. Also very important, if you are aware of a family member, if you are close friends to people who have removal orders, I would try to limit your visitation with them. I would limit your interactions with them, because sometimes you're in the wrong place at the wrong time. And if they open that door, you could also be put in danger for detention. So just be very careful. Next slide. All right, so here I provide arrest warrants. The one where it says non-binding ICE warrant is not a valid warrant, okay? You can see that it's not signed. It's not actually from a magistrate court. It's just like a document from ICE. It says U.S. Department of Homeland Security. It's just nothing, and it doesn't have information about the immigrant. It's just a blank document. So do not open the door. On the other side, we have enforceable, legally binding warrants. It has the name of the immigrant. This is just a sample, by the way. This is just a sample. It has the date of when this warrant was executed, and it has the signature of a magistrate judge. So just keep that in mind, that this information is what you're looking for once you are examining an arrest warrant. Next slide. All right. Something very important is that if you do get detained, that doesn't mean you're going to get deported. It's very important that we understand the difference. Detention means you're going to get processed in the system, and they're going to take your information, but they're not going to deport you right away. They're going to give you either an opportunity to see a judge. And if you see a judge, well, you also have the opportunity to request a bond and be released in the United States. So just understand that if you get detained doesn't mean you're going to get deported, but just understand that your rights under detention. So when you do get detained, they will process you. They'll take your fingerprints, they'll take your information, and you'll be placed in what's called removal proceedings. Proceso de remoción, removal proceedings. And this is basically a process to start your removal from the United States and return you back to your home country. So that's what that means. Again, it's just to start the process. It doesn't mean you're going to get removed. There's things that you can do during the course of this process to stop a deportation and be released in the United States. Also, before you are ever deported, you have the right to see an immigration judge. Like I said, I've said that already multiple times. You have the right to request a bond through the immigration court. You'll also have the right to say, I actually have a fear of returning back to my country. I would like a credible fear interview. So if you say that you have a fear to return to your home country, they have a process where they have to interview you. It's called a credible fear interview. And they have to make a determination that if you have a credible fear, they cannot send you back to your country. So remember that you have the right to seek that interview. Also, you have the right to speak to a lawyer at your expense. So when you're in removal proceedings, the government is not they don't have a responsibility to provide you with a lawyer, kind of like in criminal court. In criminal court, you do have the right to a lawyer. it's at the expense of the government. But when you're in this type of proceeding, you have to provide your own attorney. And like I said, it's very important that you do seek the advice of a lawyer. Very important, because if you don't seek the advice of a lawyer and you're hearing from your, people who are also detained, do this, do that, you might be making the wrong decision on your case. So just be very careful. Also, if for example, your bond gets denied, not everybody gets released, not everybody gets bonds. Also seek the type of relief available in court. The type of immigration relief available in court is very different than the relief that's given to people who are not detained. So there's additional relief in court. So just remember that. And also, let's say that your bond got denied, your relief got denied, you have the right to seek for voluntary departure. Voluntary departure under the law, it's not a deportation, but it basically says that at your own expense, you will voluntarily leave the country, and then you leave the country. So just keep that in mind, all the different levels of things that you can do in court. And again, just as a very important point, always seek the advice of an immigration lawyer before making a decision whether or not to leave the United States. It's important that you understand all of your rights, that you understand all of your options. And because if you do want to seek those opportunities, then you should before you leave the country. I always tell my clients it's best to fight here than fight in your country. Because once you get removed, there's some other penalties for leaving the country. So just always seek the advice of an immigration lawyer before departing the United States or before waiving any of your rights in court. Next slide. So what should you do now? What should you do that now? You're not detained, but you don't have a legal status. What can you do now to prepare yourself, right? Speak to a lawyer, speak to an immigration lawyer. It's very important that you create this trust with a lawyer in case there's ever a detention. You can tell your trusted family member or your friend, call this attorney. I've already spoken to them. I established a relationship with them. That way, when your family member calls the lawyer already has all of the information of the immigrant and can easily help the family member. I've had situations where I have consults with family members and I ask them, when was the first time they came to the country? I don't know, abogada. I don't know when they came to the United States. Do you know anything about their criminal history? I actually don't know anything about their criminal history. So if the immigrant is able to create this relationship with the lawyer where the lawyer has all of the information, that's going to be key for any representation in court. Also, it's good to know your options. A lot of immigrants don't know that there are options in the United States that can help them get some immigration protection, immigration status. So it's important to speak with a lawyer. Very important. I say this countless times in my live videos through my law firm, through consults. Please do not seek the advice of a notary, okay, of a paralegal, of someone who prepares documents, someone in church who is trying to be a nice person and help you, or community organizations that don't have lawyers on staff. Do not trust these people, okay? These people are not lawyers. They cannot represent you in court and they cannot represent you before an immigration agency. Speak to an immigration lawyer, please. I've seen countless cases where, my case was done by a notario. My dad went to Ciudad Juarez and he couldn't come back. So we've seen a lot of that. Or they got detained at the USCIS interview. So it's very important that you speak to a lawyer, not these people. These people don't have the right to give legal advice. These people are not licensed to be lawyers, to be able to have this authority and give legal advice. So just be very careful, please be very careful. Let's say you've spoken to the immigration lawyer and they tell you that you have options. If this is an option that is realistic for you, you can afford it, and you're like, yes, I want to start it, take the steps to start the process. Once my clients start the process, I tell them, please carry your receipt notices with you, copies of the receipt notices. So again, it's adding layers of protection. If you're ever seeing an ICE officer, not only do you have information about your kids, your family, but now you have receipt notices showing that you have a pending case with the government, with the USCIS or any immigration agency. So take the steps to speak to a lawyer. Make sure you establish a relationship. if there's options for you, this is the time to apply for these benefits. And also because the law is changing every day. I wake up every day and there's always something new. We don't know if these programs are going to be available in a year to 2 years. So if there is a way that you can apply now, do it. For sure, do it. And then also for people who have already pending cases, don't let your documents expire, like your travel document, like your work authorization. If you have DACA, do not let your DACA expire. If you're like, oh, well, I'll apply next month. Well, next month turns into 6 months, turns to a year, turns to 2 years. After 1 year of not renewing your DACA, you will not be able to renew your DACA. So it's very important that if you already have benefits, don't let them expire, okay? For example, in states like Texas, people who have a work authorization are allowed to get a driver's license. But if their work authorization is expired, they cannot get a driver's license. So just remember to always keep your documents up to date, including your country's documents, like your passport, your matricula, your electoral, whatever it may be. Keep your documents up to date. Huge, huge recommendation. And then there's also ways to prepare your family, right? Your assets, your kids. There's things called powers of attorney that appoint a third party to be your agent and step on your behalf to make decisions for you, like financial decisions, custody decisions for your kids. So this is also another way that you can protect yourself, your family, your assets. If you have a business, appointing this agent is someone that can step in if you're ever deported or detained, and they can continue your business running. So just be very careful. Also, in choosing this third-party agent, it is someone who's going to have access to a lot of your information, so it has to be someone you trust. Next slide. What happens if you are deported, right? What happens if you are deported? People who have been here for more than a year unlawfully will likely trigger certain bars. If someone's here for if more than a year, let's say 10 years, and they get detained, they get deported, they're gonna get a 10-year bar automatically as soon as they leave the United States. And let's say that, what does this 10-year bar mean? It means that you cannot return into the United States after the 10-year bar, and you have to seek readmission into the United States legally. If you, for example, you comply with the 10-year bar, you're like, I'm done, I'm going back to the United States, you enter unlawfully again, you're going to trigger what's called a permanent bar. So it's very important to understand what happens if you are detained, what certain things you need to keep aware of, what you need to be aware of. Also, if you already established your power of attorney in the United States, this is a time where you can execute this document and allow the agent to step in on your behalf, make decisions, legal decisions, financial decisions in the United States. Also very important is to inform schools, right, that you are no longer in the United States. Maybe assign another guardian to be able to pick up your kids. Call banks, other entities that you have some sort of legal obligation, legal liability, so that no one else comes in and says, oh, I'm so-and-so, I'm going to withdraw money or whatever, to prevent any type of fraud, any type of scams on your behalf. So just be very careful. It's important that you let those agencies know where you are at. If you do try to come into the United States illegally, you will probably, if you are picked up by, for example, a federal agent like a U.S. Marshal, you will be put in federal court proceeding, and that's usually a criminal case. You might be detained for 3 to 6 months up to a year, and then you will be sent back to your country. So be very careful, because if you are caught, then you will trigger other immigration consequences, but you might also be facing criminal charges on a federal level. So it's very important to seek the advice of an immigration lawyer to understand what to do once you are removed. Next slide. My advice as an immigration lawyer: stay informed. That is, speaking to an immigration lawyer, following accurate news outlets. There's a lot of information shared on social media, on TikTok, a lot of misinformation, a lot of information that really scares us as a community. We hear something and we are very concerned, about how this information can actually affect us. So just stay informed in the right way. Stay calm. It's very important to stay calm, to keep your life going, right? We cannot stop our lives because of all of the fear created by the government. We have to keep living our lives. But if you ever are detained by law enforcement or an ICE officer, stay calm. And obviously speak to a lawyer. It's very important that you understand your options now. People sometimes are like, oh, Abogada, I've spoken to 5 lawyers and this is the first time that I hear about this option. So if you've already spoken to 5 lawyers, speak to another lawyer, get a fifth, seventh recommendation about what you can do, and then also establish a relationship with the lawyer just in case you are detained. Again, prepare your families, prepare your assets, right? Your financial obligations through powers of attorney. Maybe speak to the schools and say, you know what, my spouse and I, we don't have a status in the United States. We wanted the schools to be aware of our status. And also, we want to assign other guardians to be able to pick up our kids in case of an emergency. And also talk to your kids. I know it's very difficult, but you don't have to tell them everything, but you can tell them, like, if mommy and daddy will not pick you up, grandma will pick you up, so that they're not looking for mom and dad if, you are detained. So it's important to prepare your community, your family, and let people that are around you, that know you, about your situation. And never lose hope. Never lose hope. I was a lawyer under the first Trump administration. There was a huge battle that we had to face, and we survived those 4 years. I have no doubt that we will survive this next 4 years. There's a lot of immigration relief that was passed by Congress many years ago that can help families now, still help families. A lot of, for example, DACA, he hasn't mentioned anything about DACA. So keep renewing your work permits. If you haven't done the travel document through DACA, this is the time. Still options available. So if there's an option, please seek the advice of an immigration lawyer and start your process. Next slide. So I'm going to open up this forum to allow members of the community to ask questions. If you have a question, please let me know.
Thank you, Laura. That was so informative. I have the first question for you here. I read that it's mandatory for permanent residents to carry their green cards on them at all times if they're older than 18 years old, but it is never enforced. Do you recommend doing that considering the current situation, or should you carry a copy instead?
That's a very good question. I would carry a copy instead. Keep your lawful permanent resident card, your green card, and your social security at your home. You don't need those. You don't need to carry those. Just carry a copy of your green card, and then your driver's license. Usually, driver's license is a good indicator of someone having status outside of Illinois, like Texas. But I would just carry a copy of that with you. For example, I'm a U.S. citizen. I wasn't born here, but I'm a U.S. citizen now. I wouldn't be carrying my American passport to show my status. I just carry my driver's license. And obviously, I have a picture of my passport on my phone in case of an emergency. But for those who are lawful permanent residents, just a copy is sufficient.
Thank you. And how recent should the warrant be? Like 10 days or less?
That's a very good question. I would say within the last 30 days. Because sometimes that could take some time to get them, especially if there's a high volume of requests. I would say within the last 30 days.
Then what is some legal advice for someone who is in a long-term relationship with someone who came here through a visa and has not been renewed for over 16 years? What is some advice you have?
First advice for that person to speak to an immigration lawyer. If someone has been here for 16 years and overstayed their visa, there might be other options for them. There are processes that are called self-petitions, humanitarian processes that don't need some sort of connection to a family member, like a spouse or a child. There's processes that can be applied based on something that happened to you in the United States called a self petition. So it's important for this person to seek all of their options and understand what options they should apply for now. So if they overstayed their visa, for example, you're in this long-term relationship, if you decide to get married and let's say you're a US citizen, and this person came with a visa, this is a process that you can then apply for residency in the United States. It's a process that takes about a year to a year and a half.
And then, just a moment. Berenice, ¿estás escuchando la presentación en español? Para que te puedan responder allí, para que puedas escuchar la respuesta en español. So if you're just joining now, there are instructions that have been posted to hear the interpreter. Si no estás en la presentación de español, puedes seguir las instrucciones, ir abajo las herramientas, haz clic en el icono de globo y que está etiquetado interpretación y selecciona español. Ahí podrás ver la presentación en español y escucharla en español también. Let's see, I've heard that it's fairly rare for ICE to have an actual judicial warrant, that it's just for serious crimes like human trafficking. Is that true?
No, they can get an arrest warrant for people, like I said, who have had previous removal orders, deportation orders, people who have never left and have a removal order, people who have committed criminal, violent crimes, like even drug convictions, and they're not violent, but they're serious crimes. So no, it doesn't have to be a certain specific type of crime to be able to be on the radar of ICE. Basically, anyone can be under the radar. For example, people who are, if they're doing a raid, they don't need a warrant for everybody, right? They don't need a warrant. They just are looking for anyone who doesn't have status, and then they take them into to their office and process them. So no, you're right. They don't have to have a warrant to detain people in like public spaces. But if they're coming to your home, they need a warrant to be able to detain anyone in the home.
And then we have, as a single mother, and I came to this country on a tourist visa, is there a possibility for me to still get my immigration papers in order?
There are options, regardless of the way you enter the United States. There are options for you if you're a single mother and your children were born in the United States. There's probably possibilities for you to be able to fix your status in the United States through one of your children, or through other things that might have happened to you in the United States. For example, people who have had been victims of a crime, and they might say, well, it happened many years ago, but it can still be an avenue to request what's called a U visa. Or for people who have had issues with employers, managers, and they feel they've been subject to some sort of labor abuse, labor mistreatment, can also be can also seek some sort of immigration benefit through a T visa. So there are options that don't require a family connection. It's more about your story in the United States, and we can determine whether or not, based on your story, we can identify a form of relief.
Then we're gonna just answer one more question. I know we have a lot of questions. We will have another opportunity to ask more questions from Laura as well. The last question I'm gonna pose right now is, how dangerous is it to file taxes this year with an I-10?
It's been circling around, right? We've been seeing on social media things about ICE having access to this type of information. So my recommendation: do file your taxes, because if they do have communication with the IRS, they can still find your information from prior years. It is your obligation to file taxes, so do file your taxes. So that would be my recommendation, is to move forward with that. Just understand that the IRS and ICE are separate government entities, And for ICE to be able to obtain information from the IRS, they have to request that. They didn't just magically have access to everything in all of the systems. They're separate entities, and they're not even under the same umbrella. They work under different departments. And so it's very important that you understand that. But I would encourage people to file their taxes, because if you file your taxes and you're applying for an immigration benefit, it means that you're a person of good moral character, una persona de buena conducta moral, person of good moral character. So I would encourage people to file their taxes.
Thank you so much, Laura. So informative. As I mentioned, we will have another opportunity to ask more questions. For now, we're going to move on to our next speaker. And our next speaker is Giselle Rodriguez, and she is the Executive Director at Illinois Workers in Action. She's also a Bolingbrook resident, so she's local. She understands the challenges and realities faced by immigrants and families, like as well, since her family is also an immigrant family. And she's a very dedicated person to serving the Latino community. Thank you, Giselle, for being here with us today.
Thank you, Lily. It's an honor to be here. So hi, everyone. I am Giselle Rodriguez. I am the co-founder and executive director of Illinois Workers in Action. And I'll tell you a little bit about the organization. So the organization was founded in 2021, and we are champions and advocates for our undocumented community, immigrant community, and community of workers. We provide a lot of information, trainings around workers' rights and immigrant rights. But today we're here to learn a little bit more about workers' rights and how to become a better ally. So first I'd like to start with an update. So as of January 20th, I know maybe a lot of you guys saw this on the news circulating, but the Trump administration reversed a longstanding policy that basically reversed sensitive locations or the protections around sensitive locations. And this includes giving access to healthcare facilities, schools, places of worship. And although these locations are no longer exempt from immigration enforcement, we still have rights. So it's important for us to be aware of what to look for when it comes to these sensitive locations and our rights as immigrants. And I'm sure you guys have also been aware and keeping up with the state of Illinois. So Illinois and Chicago have also been sued by the Department of Justice because we have pretty strong protections here in the state of Illinois for our undocumented community. So knowing your rights with ICE at work. So ICE must have a warrant signed by a judge or permission from your employer to enter a private area of your workplace. However, ICE can enter on the public area of your workplace without permission. But you being in that public area does not give ICE the authority to stop you, question, or arrest anyone. And again, we do not have to answer any questions. We have the right to remain silent. And it's also important to not carry any false documents with you in your wallet, while driving, at work. It's important for us not to carry that. So now I'll explain a little bit more about private spaces. So private spaces are areas where individuals have a reasonable expectation of privacy, and this include in their areas or spaces marked with a private sign. And as it relates to work, so for example, if there is a break room, we have to make sure that it says private area, authorized personnel only, different offices, things like that. So for example, if you're working at a grocery store, we have to be mindful that we do have those spaces labeled, because that just adds a protected layer to our community. Again, ensuring that if an ICE officer does come into that area, they need to present a judicial warrant. And immigration enforcement agents, again, cannot enter those private spaces without the valid judicial warrant. However, they can enter if a staff grants them access to that private space, and they can arrest individuals if they have a valid administrative warrant or if they have probable cause to believe that a person is undocumented. What to do if immigration comes to your workplace. So there are various reasons of why an immigration officer will be coming to your workplace. The first one can be due to a Form I-9 audit. And basically a Form I-9 audit is when ICE comes to your employment to check if the rules are followed by the Form I-9. And basically this form just confirms a worker's identity and if they have the authorization to work in the United States. Another reason why an ICE agent may come to your workplace is a raid. And this is when ICE agents come to your work site without a warning as part of an investigation into an employer. And we've heard of ICE raids throughout the many years in different states, such as like Iowa doing massive raids, where they go into meat packing factory and just gather their crew and detain and deport undocumented immigrants. So those are really popular, and we have heard from the administration that they're planning on doing massive raids again. The other reason why an ICE agent may come is to detain a specific person. And while they're there, although they say they are here to detain one specific individual, they may try to question or detain other individuals that they didn't come specifically looking for. So during the raid, if a raid does occur, it's important for everyone to stay calm, to ask workers to stay calm, do not run to the exits. As ICE agents can say that people who are running are likely violating immigration law. So if this does occur in your workplace, it's important that you don't run, because you're just giving another excuse for ICE agents to arrest you with probable cause. And when ICE shows you an administrative warrant with an employee's name on it, for example, and this is for coworkers, supervisors, managers, owners, right? If an ICE agent shows you a warrant with somebody else's name on it, you do not have to say if that employee is working on that day or not. And you do not have to take ICE to that employee. So you don't have to help them in any type of way. So again, do not help ICE agents sort people by their immigration status or the country they're from. We've seen cases where a raid does occur and supervisors, managers, or employees are actually helping ICE agents or individuals by nationality, by individuals who do have a status. So please do not do any of that. You can watch the agents to see if they're complying with what's written in the warrant. You can see if the agents are searching areas that are not listed in the warrant. And you can also object to those searches by voicing your objection. And if you or an employee is willing, you can also video or record what the ICE agent does at your workplace. And in the state of Illinois, we have the right to film ICE agents and police officers. So if an interaction with ICE or the police does happen, feel free to take out your phone and record, obviously without obstructing the law. Make sure you give them space and listen to them if they tell you to give them some space. Make sure you back up, but you are allowed to record during these situations. And recording helps and may be able to prove that the agent violated your rights or the worker's rights. And you can also save any company surveillance footage taken during the raid. So what if ICE agents try to stop, question, detain, or arrest a worker? So ICE agents may try to stop, question, or even arrest a worker without the proper authority. I know the attorney a couple of minutes ago explained the difference between a judicial warrant and an administrative warrant. So we have to be able to identify the difference, make sure it has a valid date, the proper name, and that it's signed by the judge. And the best way for workers to protect their right is to stay silent and ask for an attorney. And workers do not have to hand over any IDs or papers to ICE. And all workers have this right. Regardless if you're an immigrant or a citizen, you do not have to hand over any documentation. And any information that workers do give to ICE can be used against them later, which is why we are always telling individuals to remain silent. Immediately after the raid, so again, you can write or record what has been happening. You can record and write down how many ICE agents were present, if they were inside, if they're outside, how were the agents dressed, how were they armed, did the agents make you or other workers believe you could not move or leave? Did the agents mistreat anyone? If so, you can go into detail describing how that happened. And then you can also notify the union if the employees do have a union. And if ICE does arrest anyone, you can write the information of where they're being taken. So there are currently no detention centers in the state of Illinois, but individuals are still being arrested, detained, and processed in neighboring states such as Wisconsin, Indiana, and Kentucky. So we can train our staff, our employees, our coworkers to not run. Again, if ICE shows up, do not run. Do not give ICE permission to enter your workplace. Do not answer any questions or give any information. And again, we have the right to remain silent and to ask to talk to an attorney. So now we're going to look at how can we identify if we are talking to ICE or the police. So ICE can wear plain clothing or civilian clothing with a black bulletproof vest, often it says police in the front or back. We also sometimes see that it does say police and then it says ICE, just police or federal agent, right? So those are the types of distinct clothes that we should be able to look at and see what agencies they're coming from. We're also allowed, when having this interaction, to ask them for their badge so that they can verify which agency they're coming from. And this is a known fact that ICE agents do try to use different tactics to lie and to get to individuals, to tell them who they are, or talk to them or give them information. They sometimes tend to pretend that they are only police officers, which is not true, which is why sometimes they only wear vests that says police, so that they're able to talk to this individual. So it's important for us to be aware of the different uniforms that they could be wearing that day. And for example, we know that with the new administration, it's not just going to be ICE, right? There are other agencies that are going to be carrying out these activities. For example, Secret Service, the FBI, and different entities are going to be helping ICE as well. Now, when it comes to police, we can identify but the different uniforms that they're wearing, right? If they're from a specific neighborhood, like the neighborhood. So for example, like the Naperville Police Department, Bolingbrook, different areas, right? It may have where they're from, but it's always important and it's our right to ask them for their badge. Again, so filming law enforcement encounters, this is a right that we have. However, we do have to assess the risk and follow these tips. So one, make sure that we do not obstruct the police or ICE officer, film from a safe distance. And it's important that we also narrate the recording of what's happening so that we're able to utilize this information at a later time if needed. So for example, pull out your phone, say the date, the time, location, and what's happened, and try to be as descriptive as you can. But again, we have to obey different commands from police or ICE if they want us to move back and give them space. If they stop you if they ask you to stop filming, you can do so. It may make sense to protect your own safety. And it's really important for everyone to know and exercise your right. So all of you guys are here, because you care and you want to be more aware. So that's the first step, knowing your rights. And now that you do know your rights, you can exercise them. It's important to identify who will take care of your children and update any emergency contact info, like at their schools or at their hospitals, doctors. It's also important to memorize important phone numbers, gather your important documents in a safe place, and make sure that if you do have an emergency contact, they know where those documents are located. And again, get a legal consultation. We never know through the many years that we have been in the United States if there's a path for us, so it's important to get a legal consultation. Now being an ally, right? So with everything that's happening, a lot of individuals are eager to help and support any way they can. So I'm just going to talk about briefly a few different things that we can do. Specifically, U.S. citizens can be allies to immigrant friends. And this matters because our immigrant community is facing a lot of challenges in the United States, including discrimination, legal barriers, and social exclusion. And allies can actually help provide support by amplifying what's happening. Talk to your family member what's happening, your friends. Don't just be silent on this topic that is affecting your community. Amplify immigrant voices and ensure that they feel safe and respected at work, in the community, at schools, and different areas. Support in the workplace. So there are different things that we can also do in the workplace. For example, advocate for fair treatment. So ensure that your immigrant colleagues are treated fairly with equal opportunities for advancement, promotions, and pay. You can report discrimination. If you witness or hear about discrimination, report it through appropriate channels such as HR or management. If you guys also have an issue in the workplace, you guys can come to us as well. We also help with case management following different complaints with different government entities, support workplace rights. So you can also help immigrant colleagues understand their rights, such as protecting against unfair dismissal, wage and harassment, and respect privacy. So never disclose someone's immigration status unless they have explicitly shared it and are comfortable with you doing so. So if you know if a coworker or somebody that you know in your workplace is immigrant, don't go saying that information. Keep it to yourself. Now, a few everyday actions to be a better ally. So use your privilege, recognize and use your position as a U.S. citizen to speak up in places where immigrant voices might be silenced. And oftentimes it can be at work or in your community. Educate yourself. So learn more about immigration system, its history, and the current issues that are affecting our communities. For example, there is no line where immigrants can get to fix their status. There's no line. I know we always hear it all the time that, why don't you just get in line or why don't you do things like the legal way? There's none of that. That's easier for us. Undocumented immigrants do not want to be undocumented. If there was an easier path for individuals to adjust their status, they would definitely do so. So educate yourself about, the history, what's happening, how your community be affected. Look up different myths and how those are rejected. For example, another myth is that immigrants don't pay taxes, but immigrants pay taxes every millions and billions every year. So we do contribute to society. So just educate yourself, your community, your family members. And another action that we can do is support immigrant-owned businesses and nonprofits. So support businesses owned by immigrants in your community and just share information. So now I'll take some questions if anybody does have any questions.
We do. Thank you very much, Giselle. We have a couple of questions for you. First is, in May 7th, the Illinois law requires a real ID. Could this affect immigrants?
To my understanding, so you are able to get a real ID if you have a social security. So it will not affect immigrants in Illinois. So if you're an undocumented immigrant in the state of Illinois, you're able to get a license. So to my understanding, it will not affect us. Obviously, if you show up to the Secretary of State wanting a real ID, you cannot get one. But you're still able and eligible to get a driver's license here in the state of Illinois.
Thank you. Next question is, if you have a pending case, should you carry original documents like your marriage certificate or USCIS approval letter, or is it better to carry copies and leave originals with your spouse or lawyer?
Yes, I believe the attorney said that it's better to carry copies.
Next question is, what if you, a U.S. citizen, are in a traffic stop, but you have an undocumented immigrant in the car as a passenger?
Yeah, this is a great question. So if you're in a traffic stop by a police officer or ICE, the passenger is not required to carry a license or identification if they are a passenger in the vehicle. And again, it depends if your interaction is with the police or with ICE. Here in Illinois, there are different laws in place where police officers should not ask you for your immigration status, and they cannot ask you any questions around like how many years have you been in the United States, what country are you from, and they cannot cooperate with ICE. So there are different laws in place, but if you're driving and the passenger is undocumented, they do not have to show any license or ID. If you are stopped by an ICE officer during a traffic stop, if they stop you, again, ask them to show you the judicial warrant and have them show it to you through the window. Don't open your door or anything like that. You can just simply see it through the window.
Thank you. And then just the last question before we move on, but again, we see more questions and we think you keep them coming, we'll compile them. But Giselle, if someone volunteers or works at an organization that helps immigrants, is there a risk they could be accused of aiding unlawful immigrants and therefore have the government or ICE come after them? Or how likely do you think it is for them to start going after people who help immigrants?
That's a great question. I may let the attorney answer this question, but I believe that should not be the case. If you're volunteering, you're not, you're not protecting them, you're not offering sanctuary to them, you're just volunteering. But I would let the attorney answer that. But I will answer this other question around if we offer these presentations to workplaces. So yes, our organization, Illinois Works in Action, has been doing a lot of presentations across the state. As of recently, we've been doing a lot of presentations in Aurora, Juliet, in different warehouses, in different grocery stores. So if anybody is interested in bringing these presentations to your community, these resources, please feel free to message us and we'll be happy to connect with you to schedule this. These presentations can be in person or they can be virtual, and we have English and Spanish as well.
Thank you so much, Giselle. That's so informational. I did just want to make a really brief statement, just acknowledging that sometimes there's differing opinions about how we should navigate some of these situations. And ultimately, it's really up to the individual, right, to decide what is the best course of action for themselves. I think, Giselle, you provide a really, a very sound point on, not needing to necessarily share any information. And then we also heard from Laura, the immigration lawyer, sharing that sometimes cooperating can also be helpful. So it's really up to the person to decide, what's going to be best in their situation. But it's good to hear, the differences of opinion. Thank you so much, Giselle. We're going to move on to our third speaker. And up next, we have Lee Ragsdale. Lee is the director of the Reentry Resource Program at the Education Justice Project at the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign. In 2017, Lee introduced the RRP's second guide for people who are facing deportation. Lee herself has a personal experience with deportation since her husband, Eric, was deported to Mexico, where she lives now. Thank you so much, Lee.
Thanks, Lily, and thank you to everyone for inviting me today. I'm really excited to be here and share a different resource that is available to people in our communities. As Lily mentioned, my husband was deported. It was back in 2013. So this is my 12th year in Mexico. I have connections in Michoacan, and I currently live in the state of Guanajuato. And I wanted to also mention that I'm part of a deportation response team here in Mexico, of a network of organizations that are prepared to provide accompaniment and support to people after deportation. I'm with an organization called the Education Justice Project. We're based at the University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign in the College of Education, and we're primarily a college and prison program. So we offer upper division courses at Danville Prison, a men's medium security prison in central Illinois. But beyond that program, we have others, including our Prison to Gown Pathway program, our Policy and Research Division, and the program I direct, the Reentry Resource Program. So you can move to the next slide. So when we talk about reentry, we're primarily talking about prison reentry. Since 2015, we've been producing a guide called Mapping Your Future, also available in Spanish, for individuals who are released from prison in Illinois. So in the United States, we incarcerate people for so long that when they're released, they really need to be connected to information in order to reestablish themselves, which is not dissimilar from the deportation process, right? So that's why we recognize that deportation is a traumatic transition, much like being released from prison after a long period of time, where people can be empowered by being connected to resources and information. So that's kind of the parallel, the connection between our work with people in the justice system and those who are being deported from the US. We also have a website of reentry resources, as well as all our guides can be downloaded from our website, and a video that's specific to people who are being released from prison. And we can move on to the next slide. So I want to talk about this guide. And when I say guide, it's actually a pretty hefty book. It's about 170 pages. Excuse me, the 6 main sections are preparing for possible deportation, life after deportation, healing and moving forward. We also have a brief section on deportation to Central America. We have a directory of organizations that we've identified throughout Mexico and Central America that will assist deported people, and additional resources. Before we move on, I want to mention a little bit about this guide in that it is produced by people who've been deported and by their family members. You know, after my husband's deportation, I was very angry for quite a while, and I was assuming that we would move back to the US. When that wasn't in the cards, I realized that we could produce something based on our experience of navigating, you know, reestablishing. My husband hadn't lived in Mexico since he was 4 months old. I had never lived in Mexico. So we kind of turned our experience into something that might help others. And I will say it's been a process adjusting to life in Mexico. It was definitely not in my plan, but it is possible to, you know, have a happy life and thrive after deportation. And there's a network of people like me and like my husband who provide a community here in Mexico and throughout the region. Okay, we can move to the next slide. Just like in our prison reentry guides, we want to focus on the voices of people who've been through this. So we have quotes throughout the guide from people who have been deported and their family members, giving very real advice, right? So Jennifer says the most important thing you can do as a deportee is to make connections while you're still in the States to learn a trade you can do online. That's been a lifesaver for us to be able to secure online work and make US dollars. Israel talks about having people to help you, make contact with people in your home country and try to have someone waiting for you when you get there. And Alex, who's pictured there, he was deported to Honduras, but relocated to Guatemala. If you're in prison and have some time, get your documents in order and your families. Take any courses you can, any certificates, even if prison issued, especially anything you can do with your hands, plumbing, carpentry, sheet metal. So you'll find these quotes from people who helped us build this guide throughout the resource. Next slide. So this guide is unique. There is a section on Know Your Rights, and I've taken some notes from the previous presenters in order to update this section. We also have information on deportation planning, which I'll talk about a little bit more. But what I haven't seen in other guides are the last 3 bullets. What to expect with the detention and deportation process. Now, this can be very traumatic because they don't tell you where they're going to deport you to. But if you have a little bit of information about what to expect, for instance, most people in Illinois end up being deported to Reynosa or Matamoros with the Texas border. And so if you know that you'll go to one of these 2 spots, you can research ahead of time what resources are there, who might be able to meet you. And it takes a little bit of the trauma out, knowing a bit about what to expect. There's also about 75 pages on how to navigate life in Mexico, as well as sections on Central America and connections to resources, as I mentioned. Next slide. So again, more specifically, what can you use the guide for? Well, it's divided into 3 sections. Preparing for possible deportation, as I mentioned, know your rights, how to interact with ICE, getting legal help, and how to make a deportation plan. There's a section on life after deportation that has information on finding a shelter at the border and staying safe. particularly at the border, which can be a dangerous region. Getting birth certificates and IDs, whether those are something you can get beforehand in the US, especially for US citizen children. But in this section, we focus on getting those documents in Mexico. Opening a bank account, getting a job, things that you might assume are very similar to the US, but often are not. So we walk the reader through all those steps, signing up for benefits and continuing your education. We also recognize that both incarceration and reentry from prison, as well as deportation, are traumatic experiences. And so we provide information on healing and moving forward. In our deportation guide, this includes information on navigating culture shock, as well as rebuilding relationships, perhaps with family in Mexico or beyond that you are returning to, as well as maintaining relationships with folks you may have left behind in the States. There's also a section on mindfulness. Next slide. So as I mentioned, if you know a little bit more about what to expect with the process, you're in a better position, right? I won't say you necessarily have more power, but at least you can navigate what would otherwise be an extremely potentially traumatic experience. So there's information about where you might be deported to, depending on where you're located in the US. What resources you can identify there, whether there's migrant shelters or soup kitchens or Mexican immigration services, excuse me, available to help you. It's important to stay safe at the border. My husband is from the state of Michoacan, and when he was deported, he was told to get on the first bus south as soon as possible because he was particularly vulnerable to kidnapping and extortion. So it is something that happens, but it is important to know how to stay safe. This next topic, preparing for the possibility of detention or incarceration after deportation, is something that we are gathering information on for the next edition. It's very disturbing what we've been hearing, particularly in El Salvador. We know that people are being arrested upon deportation and incarcerated in prisons. And there's a report that I'm happy to share about that, that talks about that particular danger for people who are deported to that country. When my husband was deported to Mexico, he was essentially free. He was able to walk across the bridge, and there were Mexican immigration agents that were offering services like food, a phone call, a ride to the bus station. We have someone that we work closely with in Tijuana who's let us know that with this new program that's being rolled out in Mexico, it's called Mexico Te Abraza, they're actually forcibly detaining people in Tijuana, which is very disturbing to think about, that someone would not be free after deportation. And they're sending people on buses to the state in Mexico where they were born, whether they have connections there or not. So we're hoping this is just problems with rolling out the program and that they will be not depriving people of their liberty or forcing them to take certain buses once the program gets going. But it is something very concerning, and it's something we've just heard about in Tijuana to date. Think about crossing back, just like Laura mentioned, there's a section discouraging people, frankly, from taking that risk because of the possibility of federal charges, including potentially 20 years in a federal prison in my husband's case, because he does have a background. Next slide. This has been talked about, but I want to highlight a couple of other things based on my experience and the experience of being in community with people who've been deported here in Mexico. Gathering documents is really important, especially those that are from the US. I know of people who are not able to put their children in school here in Mexico, although that is technically against the law to prohibit anyone from entering school because of lack of documents, but it does happen. So it's really important to have your children's birth certificates from the US, or you can also visit a Mexican consulate or a consulate of your country, potentially if they're a safe institution for you, to request those documents ahead of time. It's really difficult to get documents from Mexico in the US. Sometimes if it's a mixed status family, the US citizen member needs to travel back to actually request the documents, get them notarized and apostilled, and professionally translated in order to be usable in another country. And this is all laid out in the book, how to navigate that process. As others mentioned, it's important to designate a caregiver for your minor children if you are picked up by ICE. There's information about getting a caregiver affidavit, which is something that needs to be notarized. I want to mention that we're also not attorneys, but we have worked with attorneys to make sure that the information in this guide is true. It does need to be updated, and frankly, we're waiting to see how things play out in the US. But we don't, we're not giving legal advice. We are giving information that we think is helpful based on the experiences of people who've been deported and their advocates. Another way you can plan is to write down and memorize important phone numbers, right? Hardly anyone memorizes phone numbers anymore because they're all in our phone, but that's an important thing you can do ahead of time. You can also pack a go bag. When my husband was deported, I was able to drop off a bag with clothing, toiletries, cash at Broadview Detention Center in Chicago, which I believe is still the final point of people being deported from the region. As others have mentioned, creating a family plan, sharing it with all members based on the children's age and development is another thing that people can do to prepare. Next slide. So just like in our prison reentry guides, we are connecting people to resources on how to navigate life after prison or in the country of origin. So getting your IDs and documents is a little bit complicated. There's about 5 that you need here in Mexico. So there's information on how to do that, in what order, what you need, what documents you need to bring to get those IDs. There are also a number of government support programs that are new under the previous administration that didn't exist before. There's programs that provide cash assistance to single mothers. There's a Social Security program that pays out monthly stipends to retired people. Both of my in-laws have enrolled in that program recently, and I've seen that functional program here. So there are a number of government support programs that are available here now that were not available just 6 or 7 years ago. And that's all listed in the guide. Next slide. There's a section on employment. The subtitle of the guide is A Guide to the Challenges and Opportunities After Deportation, right? So we want to be frank that there are a number of challenges, but that there are opportunities that individuals who have lived in the US may have that they don't realize they have. And I know this font is really small, so I apologize for that. But we do have a section, for instance, on people who might be looking for work who are bicultural or bilingual. My husband was able to teach English in China online from Mexico and make pretty good wages. There's plenty of work in the tourist industry as well as online. And we outlined some of those key employment opportunities. Next slide. There's information about the complicated Mexican healthcare system, the different health plan options that are available to different individuals based on where they've worked in the private sector or in Mexican institutions. Next slide. So that ends my review of the book, but I want to mention that there's other things that we do besides just produce this deportation guide. We have a scholarship opportunity for people who have been deported from the United States along with their immediate family members. The picture there that you see, and there's a couple links that you might be interested in following, is of Cesar. He was one of our scholarship recipients a couple of years ago. His story is particularly heartbreaking. He was in prison in Texas for 40 years on death row. He's innocent. He was released and deported during the pandemic, plopped down in the middle of Mexico City. And we were honored to be able to give him a scholarship to take a baking course. There's a link to his GoFundMe. He does have advocates. He's able to work a little bit, but he could definitely use some support. And there's also a link to a documentary about his case by Mexican documentary filmmaker Santiago Esteno. And at the top of the screen, there's a link to the application. So if you know of anyone who might be interested in this scholarship, please encourage them to apply. The deadline is not until March 31st. Next slide. So I want to talk about action items because I think that is one way that we can all feel a little bit like we have a little bit more power in the face of a really difficult time in our country's history, right? So first of all, you can help us share these guides. We were featured in the Chicago Tribune last week, but that's really the first time that we've gotten any kind of major publicity. And we're a staff of 5 people, so our capacity is limited. So you could help us by distributing copies of the guide. We can send them to you for free. Please consider sharing the guide if you're part of a professional association or a listserv, or perhaps there's an organization that you know of that we should contact to share a new path with. You can let us know that. And there's our email on the page there. If you'd move to the next slide. You can also help us improve our guides. So is your organization in our directory? Should it be? There's a way to request that you be added. We are always open to suggestions. You know, we are, as I mentioned, not immigration attorneys. We're people with lived experience and advocates, but we don't know everything. And frankly, it's an ambitious guide. So if there's anything that you think needs to be changed or updated, please reach out. We're also interested in interviewing people who've been deported, who might want to share their experiences for the new edition. You can also help us create the new edition. We have a research and writing team that is just now starting work to identify what from this current administration we want to include. As Laura said, it's changing day by day. So it's something that we really won't finalize until our printing deadline, which we're aiming for like a June deadline. But that's one way that you can get involved. Next slide. You might say, well, how do I get copies of this guide? I know that Lily mentioned that they were available for folks who are attending this webinar, and I'm very grateful for that. But I also wanted to mention you can request online, you can download the PDF, and we send guides for free to anyone living in the US facing the threat of deportation. So if you know of someone who could use a copy of a guide, we're happy to put that in the mail to them. Next slide, sorry. We also have an event coming up next Wednesday at noon. It is about the book Deported Americans. So Beth Caldwell is the author. She's going to speak. This book it refers to 2 groups of people who identify as deported Americans. One are people like my husband who lived in the US since they were infants and found themselves deported to another country, although they identify culturally as American, as well as their US citizen family members like me. I could live in the US, but if I want to maintain my family, I'm really not able to. So I'm in a sense a deported American as well. We're also joined by Tran Dang from the Rhizome Center for Migrants. This is a US legal aid clinic in Guadalajara, Mexico. They help people with their paperwork to try to return to the US, and it's the only legal aid organization in Mexico that provides services in the US that I know of. She'll be speaking along with Alex, one of our members who was deported, a deported American in Guatemala, and Chelsea, a deported American here in the San Miguel de Allende community where I live. So there's a link to register for this event and join us next week. Next slide. You can also join our program as a member. You can sign up for updates on our guides through those links. Next slide. All right, that's that. Yeah, I know there's a lot of links in here. Hopefully they'll be shared. They'll be shared out afterwards. Are there questions for me on any of these topics?
Thank you, Lee. There's definitely some questions, and between yourself and Deanna and Giselle, if whoever is best equipped to answer. But for one how true is it that we will no longer to be able to travel by plane with just our Mexican passport, for example?
That's not something I'm able to answer, so I'll defer to someone else.
Sure.
I can
Laura
jump
or sure, thank you.
Of course. So the reality is that with everything that's going on under the current administration, I just recently heard today from one of my colleagues, flew from Puerto Rico to Chicago. There was ICE officers at the different gates checking passports and documentation. So it is a higher risk for people to be traveling with their national documents. And as Giselle mentioned, Real ID is something that's going to come into effect this year. And with that, if you don't have a Real ID, you won't be able to travel. So it's gonna be more difficult for immigrants to be able to move around inside the United States.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Laura. And then you also answered about the Real ID on May 7th. So documents like passport, birth certificate, and more are needed to have a gold star on the right side of license. Is this going to affect immigrants?
Yes. So there's states in the United States that allow immigrants to have a driver's license, but in most cases they don't have the full privilege of like a Real ID, right? A full document that enables them to travel inside the United States. So unfortunately, a lot of immigrants, even if they have a driver's license, will not be able to get a Real ID if they don't have, like, for example, a work authorization document along with a social security number. And again, this is to reinforce the idea, if there's options available for you to apply now, this is a time to apply for them, because most of them offer benefits during the process as a work permit and social security, which then enables you to get a driver's license with a Real ID.
Okay. Another question is it true that Trump administration has enacted a pause on all immigration applications filed by migrants from Latin America and Ukraine Ukraine is allowed to enter the US under certain Biden era programs?
I can answer that if it's okay. So there is not an official USCIS announcement. It is sort of like a leaked document. In other words, basically, a lot of people who came into the United States through a family-based parole, humanitarian parole, it's considered a legal entry, right? So if they came in with a parole, it's a legal entry. And then if, for example, they have children over the age of 21 or they're married to a US citizen, then they can adjust their status in the United States. So basically what this leaked document is saying is that regardless, so if they didn't do it with the parole, they still wouldn't be able to adjust because this program was some way unlawful. So they weren't really admitted or inspected legally into the United States. I'm sure there will be a lawsuit about this. But obviously we will see what happens, but there's no official notification from USCIS yet. So as of right now, we just need to first see what the government is going to say officially before sharing this information.
Thank you. And Lee, somebody's asking for you the link for next week's event, please. If you could just put it in the chat and I can send it to everybody as well. That's it for questions. I'll defer to Lily, but thank you, all of you, for such an informative presentation of better understanding where we are and what we can do to prepare ourselves.
Thank you, everyone. I'm really grateful to have Laura, Lee, and Giselle here with us today and share all of their valuable knowledge. I think especially when we put all of your knowledge together, I think it's especially valuable, right, to hear from different perspectives. We do see the link being added to the chat for Lee's event. And then I wanted to say thank you to our partners again. We can go back to the other slide, please. Thank you. Padres, Lideres, Aurora, Padres, Lideres, Activos de Aurora, sorry. Thank you for sharing our event, CAWA, as well as EJP, Lee for being here, Senator Ellman's office, Illinois Workers in Action, and then Laura Leon Law. Thank you so much for your time and for your support of tonight's event. Next slide. Then as we wrap up today, I'm hoping that we could leave with just thinking about what do we want to walk away with, right? You know, we've heard a lot of reality checks that yes, you know, things aren't great, right? But right now, but at the same time, we also want to be hopeful about our futures and thinking about if some of us are facing deportation, right? Can we think of deportation as a plant facing a storm, with the storm being the threat of deportation and the resources that we're gaining, the knowledge, the advice, if we're seeking advice from a lawyer, support from our community, from organizations like the ones that are supporting tonight's program. These are all different types of nutrients, right? That even that when we are facing a threat, that it doesn't mean that those weathering difficult conditions, right, needs to result in catastrophe. It can mean that it helps to prepare us to be informed and prepared, right, for the possibility of enduring challenges and for us to be able to be and remain resilient. So again, thank you. If there are no more questions, we can wrap up. We do have some resources to share with you, and I know Diana is adding them to the chat. We're able to put together a couple resources that were shared not only from our presenters, but that have also been shared with us in the community, where you'll find a lot of the links that you saw in Lee's presentation, as well as others that were shared by Laura, and then other information. You can find links there to print red cards, or to also have the emergency number that's been provided by ICIRR in case you do see or encounter ICE in the community, so that a rapid response team can check it out, check out the situation and see if they are in fact in the community. And this is one way of us being able to take some action. So you'll find a lot of good information there. Hopefully you'll get a chance to check out some of those resources. And again, Diana is adding that to the chat, so you'll be able to find the link for the resources there. There are a few slides, and so you can also download them. You can download them as a PDF through the link, or as a PowerPoint if that's easier for you. Thank you, everyone. Have a wonderful rest of your evening.
So one last thing, we will also send it out via email. Thank you for everybody, just to make sure that everything is compiled. Again, thank you.
Thank you.
Bye. Good night.